Hello everyone, welcome to our first video in our second week of class. In this video, we're going to be asking, how do we think about God and suffering? What's the right way to approach this topic? Now, just to recap, last week we saw that two things make a person trustworthy: character and capability. We assumed that God is capable, that he's always totally in control of every situation. So today, we're going to focus on God's character. We're going to be asking, do we have evidence that God is good? Last week, we also came to a definition of trust. We said trust is a volitional inference that bridges a gap that would otherwise exist between evidence and belief. And you can go back and watch last week's video if you want a refresher on that definition. I wish we could go over it again, but we just don't have the time. We looked at two ways of getting evidence about someone's character and capability. The first is the mother and baby situation, the sort of everyday life situation, and the other is the brother in arms situation, the moment of crisis. And at the end of class yesterday, we decided that our central question is, the big question is, can we trust God with our pain? Now, in our second video today, we're going to begin to answer that question by looking at God's character through a brother-in-arms situation. We're not going to look at God's actions throughout the whole history of the world. We're just going to focus on a short period of crisis, at a point where God put his life on the line for us. But in this video, we're going to take a step back from the question, can we trust God with our pain? We're going to take a step back and we're going to just try to make sure that we're thinking through that question in the right way. So let's use the example of a picture. Let's say that everything we believe about the world has to fit inside this frame. This picture frame contains our total picture of reality. Now, we know that evil exists and we suffer. That's part of our picture of reality. And we've assumed that God is in control. That's also part of our picture of reality. So, when we ask, can we trust God with our pain? What we're really asking is, can we fit God's goodness into our picture of reality? Is there any room for us to believe that God is good if we already believe that we suffer and that God is in control? And of course, as it's shown right now, there isn't room for God's trustworthiness, his goodness and control, to fit in the same picture of reality as our pain. What we need is some way of understanding the relationship between God's control, our pain, and God's goodness that allows us to fit them all together and to fit them into the same picture of reality. But we don't want to just squash these pieces together and make ourselves believe that they can fit in. On the face of it, these pieces don't fit together. There's tension between them. If we're going to say that they can go together, what we need is a framework that shows us how they fit together and can hold them together despite the tension between them. We need a way of thinking, a piece of evidence that can hold these things together. Now, since we know that we experience a lot of pain and we've assumed that God is in control, what we're looking for is some reason to believe or piece of evidence that God's goodness can also fit into this picture of reality. Now, for those of you who like philosophical terms, what we're looking for is a solution to what philosophers call the problem of evil. The problem of evil is about whether it is reasonable to say that God is in control, that we suffer, and that God is good. Some people say that if the Christian God is a God who can be trusted, if the Christian God is a God who is both good and in control, then the existence of evil and suffering proves that the Christian God does not exist. These people say that evil and our suffering leave no room for the Christian God to be part of our picture of reality. But for those of us who don't think that the existence of evil proves that God doesn't exist, there's one thing we need to be really careful of. Sometimes, when we think about God and evil, we feel sick, like this guy right here. We hear about children being raped by their own fathers. We learn about mentally handicapped people being tortured with household appliances. We see someone who is working so hard to build a healthy life continually pulled back by problems that she hasn't caused. She's just inherited them from her parents. We see lewd and abusive people honored in our society. And we just can't bear these things. We feel overwhelmed. Sometimes we just want that feeling to go away. We want something that will make us less sick to our stomach. Evil makes us want Dramamine. But this is the wrong response. And that's one of the most forceful statements I think you'll hear me make in this entire class. So let me explain why I'm saying that. Evil is sickening. When we see evil, the appropriate, healthy, accurate response is revulsion. Our bodies upchuck when they reject something, when they want to purge our system from something that is toxic. That's the right response to evil. If we're looking for an answer to evil that makes us feel less sick, if we're looking for a response to evil that makes it easier to swallow, then we're asking to be deceived, to be lied to. If ulcers are making you nauseous, you need to face the problem, not take Dramamine. Actually, I think if we're trying to ignore how sickening evil is, then we're trying to ignore the cross. Christianity says that evil is so serious, so sick, that nothing less than the death of God could deal with it. I love this song that says this about the cross. Ye who think of sin but lightly, nor suppose the evil great, here may view its nature rightly, here its guilt may estimate. The cross of Christ is what says we can't take Dramamine. The cross is what tells us the truth about evil. It is sickening. Now, I think that the cross also tells us more than that. And we're going to look at what that more is in our second video today. But in this video, we asked, how do we think about God and suffering? How should we go about answering the question of whether we can trust God with our pain? Well, we saw that we need to look for something that can hold together our suffering and the existence of a God who can be trusted in the same picture of reality. And as we're looking for that thing that can do that job, we can't ask to stop feeling sick. We can only ask for the ability to trust God, even though we are sick.